The United States spans over 3.8 million square miles, with a GDP exceeding $27 trillion, yet it's made up of exactly 50 states. Why not 49? Why not 51? The journey from 13 colonies to today's 50-state union is full of land deals, wars, and power struggles that shaped the nation's economy and identity. Some states were bought for pennies per acre, while others sparked fierce political debates. This story is more than history. It's about how power, money, and strategy built modern America. If you're new to USA Revealed, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The United States began as 13 British colonies along the East Coast, each with its own government, economy, and way of life. In 1776, these colonies declared independence from Britain, forming a new nation founded on the principles of liberty and self-governance. After securing independence, the fledgling country faced the challenge of establishing a unified government. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was adopted, creating a framework for the federal system that balanced power between the states and the central government. At the time, the United States was still geographically limited. The 13 colonies were centered along the Atlantic coast, but the nation's ambition extended far beyond these initial borders. The Constitution provided the structure for future states to join the Union, but the process of expansion would be gradual, driven by both economic necessity and political vision. One of the first major milestones in this expansion came with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. For just $15 million, the United States acquired vast territories from France, doubling its size overnight. This acquisition added land that would eventually become 15 new states, including Louisiana, Missouri, and Arkansas. The purchase was a key moment in the nation's growth, opening the door to the westward expansion that would shape the country for decades to come. As the U.S. grew in territory, so did its economy. By the early 19th century, the nation's agricultural base was booming, especially in the South, where cotton plantations thrived. This economic growth drove demand for more land and more states, especially as settlers pushed westward in search of new opportunities. However, with this growth came tensions over the issue of slavery. As new territories sought statehood, the debate over whether they would be free or slave states became a crucial issue, often threatening to divide the nation. By the 1820s, the process of adding new states was becoming more systematic. The first major challenge came in 1820 with the Missouri Compromise, which allowed Missouri to join the Union as a slave state while maintaining a balance between free and slave states. This balance was crucial for maintaining political stability, as each state added to the Union had the potential to shift the balance of power in Congress. Throughout the 19th century, the U.S. continued to expand, adding states through a combination of treaties, purchases, and wars. The annexation of Texas in 1845 and the subsequent Mexican-American War led to the addition of California, Nevada, and other western territories. By the time the Civil War ended in 1865, the United States had grown to 36 states, and the question of how to handle the admission of new states was more important than ever. In the decades that followed, the process of adding states became more routine, with territories seeking admission based on population growth, economic opportunity, and political negotiations. By 1959, the United States had reached its current total of 50 states, and the expansion had transformed it into a global economic powerhouse with a GDP that is now the largest in the world. The Louisiana Purchase, completed in 1803, was a pivotal moment in American history. For just $15 million, which was a bargain at around 3 cents an acre, the United States acquired a vast territory from France, doubling the size of the young nation. This land, stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, included parts of 15 future states, including Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. It was a monumental step in the U.S.'s westward expansion and set the stage for the country's economic growth and geopolitical influence. At the time of the purchase, the United States was struggling to establish itself as a stable and prosperous nation. The economy was largely agrarian, relying heavily on farming and the export of goods like tobacco and cotton. The acquisition of new land provided an unprecedented opportunity for settlers to claim fertile soil and expand the nation's agricultural base. This opened the door for further economic development, particularly in the South and West, where cash crops like cotton would drive the nation's economy throughout the 19th century. By 1830, the U.S. had become one of the world's leading agricultural exporters, with cotton alone accounting for nearly half of all U.S. exports. The Louisiana Purchase also fueled a period of territorial expansion driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that it was America's divine right and duty to expand across the North American continent. This belief spurred settlers, pioneers, and entrepreneurs to push westward in search of new opportunities. Manifest destiny was not just a cultural or political ideology, it was also a powerful economic motivator. The discovery of gold in California in 1848, for instance, triggered the gold rush, bringing thousands of people to the Western territories in hopes of striking it rich. This economic boom led to the rapid development of cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, which would eventually become major economic hubs. As settlers moved westward, the U.S. government facilitated expansion by negotiating treaties and acquiring more land. The annexation of Texas in 1845 added vast territories in the Southwest, while the Oregon Territory, acquired through a treaty with Britain in 1846, gave the U.S. control over the fertile land of the Pacific Northwest. These acquisitions were crucial for the growth of the U.S. economy, providing new resources like timber, gold, and fertile farmland, and creating opportunities for trade and infrastructure development. However, territorial expansion also brought with it deep political and social challenges. The issue of slavery became a divisive topic as new states were added, with the balance of free and slave states often determining the political landscape. The tensions eventually led to the Civil War in 1861, a conflict that would reshape the nation both politically and economically. Despite these challenges, the Louisiana Purchase and subsequent territorial expansions played an essential role in shaping the United States into an economic powerhouse. By the late 19th century, the U.S. had become one of the world's largest economies, with a GDP that had grown exponentially due to the natural resources and agricultural products coming from the newly acquired territories. The expansion helped establish the United States as a dominant force on the world stage, setting the foundation for its future economic success. Geography played a critical role in shaping the United States' expansion and the boundaries of its states. From the natural barriers of mountains and rivers to the coastlines that facilitated trade, the land itself often determined where people settled, how states formed, and how the U.S. grew into an economic powerhouse. One of the most influential geographical features in the early U.S. was the Mississippi River. Serving as a natural boundary, the Mississippi was a key factor in territorial expansion and state formation. The river was vital for trade, particularly in the early 1800s when most U.S. trade relied on water transport. This was especially true for the South, where cotton production thrived along the riverbanks. By 1860, cotton was responsible for over 50% of U.S. exports, and the Mississippi River played a central role in transporting it to global markets. The river also served as a natural border between the eastern U.S. and the western territories, shaping early decisions on where states would be created. The Appalachian Mountains, stretching from the northeast to the southeast, were another significant factor in the nation's expansion. Early in U.S. history, the mountains acted as a physical barrier to settlement and trade, limiting westward expansion. However, as new technologies like the steamboat and railroads emerged in the 19th century, these mountains became less of a hindrance. By the 1830s, the construction of the Erie Canal, which connected the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean, opened new trade routes that helped fuel the nation's industrial growth. In 1840, the U.S. economy was already experiencing rapid growth, with industrial output tripling since 1820. The canal and subsequent railroads opened up western territories, allowing settlers and goods to flow more freely. The role of coastlines was just as influential. The U.S. Atlantic coastline was essential for international trade, especially as the country moved toward becoming a global economic power. Ports like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia were critical hubs for importing goods and exporting agricultural products. The Pacific coastline, acquired after the Mexican-American War and the annexation of California, was equally important for economic growth. By 1850, California's gold rush had attracted over 300,000 settlers, spurring the development of San Francisco into a major financial center. Today, the Port of Los Angeles remains one of the busiest in the world, handling goods valued at over $250 billion annually. Geography also influenced how states were divided. the U.S. adopted a system of straight-line borders, which often ignored natural features like rivers and mountain ranges. While this allowed for easier administration, it led to conflicts over land use and resources, especially as the economy grew and the competition for fertile soil intensified. The division of states along these artificial lines created political and economic tension, particularly as new states were admitted into the Union. Ultimately, geography did more than shape the physical boundaries of the U.S. It influenced the economic foundations of the nation. From trade routes along rivers and coastlines to the land's resources, geography played a central role in determining where people lived, what industries thrived, and how the U.S. became one of the largest economies in the world. The cultural and political landscape of the United States played an essential role in shaping the process of state admissions throughout the 19th century. As the nation expanded westward, the question of whether new territories would be admitted as free or slave states became a critical issue, deeply influencing the balance of power in Congress and the direction of the nation. The political balancing of free and slave states, the Civil War, and the cultural factors surrounding these issues would ultimately define the state admissions process and the future of the Union. The balance of power between free and slave states was a fundamental concern for lawmakers and politicians, particularly as the United States expanded its borders. At the heart of this issue was the question of whether new states and territories would allow slavery, a practice that had been deeply entrenched in the Southern economy. By the early 19th century, slavery was a key component of the Southern agricultural economy, especially in states like South Carolina and Georgia, where large cotton plantations relied on enslaved labor. Conversely, in the northern states, slavery had been largely abolished, and the economy was transitioning to industrialization and manufacturing. One of the first significant political compromises to address this issue was the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This legislation allowed Missouri to join the Union as a slave state while simultaneously admitting Maine as a free state, maintaining a delicate balance in the Senate. More importantly, the Missouri Compromise established the 36 degrees 30 minutes parallel as the dividing line between free and slave states. This compromise sought to prevent conflict by clearly demarcating the geographic boundaries between free and slave territories. However, it also revealed the growing divide between the North and South, as the issue of slavery continued to shape national politics. As the United States expanded further, the issue of slavery became even more contentious. The annexation of Texas in 1845 and the subsequent Mexican-American War in the 1840s brought new territories into the Union. With these new lands came the question of whether they would be free or slave states. The debate over the expansion of slavery culminated in the Compromise of 1850, which included the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, requiring citizens to return runaway slaves. In exchange, California was admitted as a free state, tipping the balance of power in favor of the North. This compromise was designed to maintain peace, but it further entrenched sectional tensions. The increasing polarization between the North and South over the issue of slavery set the stage for the Civil War. By 1861, the election of Abraham Lincoln, who opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories, was the final straw for many Southern states. In response, several Southern states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederacy. The Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865, was not just a battle over slavery but also a fight for state sovereignty. Southern states believed they had the right to make their own decisions regarding slavery and other issues, while Northern states argued for a stronger federal government. The outcome of the Civil War reshaped the nation's political landscape and had a profound impact on state admissions. After the war, Congress passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which abolished slavery, granted citizenship to former slaves, and protected voting rights. These amendments fundamentally changed the nature of state sovereignty as they placed new federal requirements on states, particularly in the South. The Reconstruction period that followed saw the admission of new Southern states back into the Union, but under stricter conditions that aimed to ensure civil rights for all citizens. Culturally, the expansion of the U.S. also saw the rise of distinct regional identities. In the North, industrialization and immigration brought a different set of values and priorities, including a focus on commerce, labor rights, and public education. In contrast, the South remained heavily agricultural, with an economy reliant on slavery and later sharecropping. These cultural differences were reflected in the political and economic priorities of the states, and they played a major role in how states approached issues like taxation, infrastructure, and civil rights. The balance of power in Congress was a key factor in state admissions throughout the 19th century. As new states were added to the Union, lawmakers carefully considered how each state's admission would impact the political dynamics of the Senate and House of Representatives. This political calculus was especially important in the years leading up to the Civil War, as each new state had the potential to tip the balance between free and slave states. The results of these decisions had long-lasting consequences, shaping the nation's political and cultural landscape for generations. In conclusion, the process of state admissions in the United States was deeply influenced by cultural and political factors, particularly the debate over slavery and state sovereignty. The political balancing of free and slave states, the Civil War, and the cultural differences between the North and South all played a critical role in shaping the nation's expansion. These issues not only influenced the course of American history but also laid the foundation for the nation's economic and political future. The future of U.S. statehood. The future of U.S. statehood remains a topic of intense debate, shaped by political agendas, public opinion, and the economic implications of adding or even removing states. While the United States has remained at 50 states since 1959, movements and discussions around potential additions continue to gain momentum. Washington, D.C. remains at the forefront of statehood conversations. With over 700,000 residents, more than Wyoming and Vermont, D.C. has a GDP of approximately $140 billion, driven by government services, healthcare, and finance. Residents pay among the highest per capita federal taxes in the country but lack voting representation in Congress. Supporters argue that granting D.C. statehood would correct a fundamental democratic imbalance. In 2021, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill in favor of D.C. statehood, but it stalled in the Senate, largely due to partisan concerns about adding a reliably democratic state to the Union. Puerto Rico is another territory where statehood discussions are ongoing. With a population of around 3.2 million and a GDP of about $105 billion, Puerto Rico has held 6 referendums on its political status. In the most recent vote in 2020, 52% favored statehood. The island has struggled with economic challenges, including a debt crisis and slow recovery from natural disasters like Hurricane Maria. Statehood advocates argue it could unlock increased federal funding and investment, helping to stabilize Puerto Rico's economy. However, concerns about cultural identity, language, and the potential political implications continue to divide both Puerto Ricans and mainland Americans. Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa also remain territories without voting representation in Congress. Though these regions are small in population, Guam has about 170,000 residents. They contribute economically and serve in the U.S. military at high rates. While these areas have not pushed as strongly for statehood, questions about representation and rights continue to surface. On the flip side, discussions about the possibility of losing states are rare but not unheard of. Some regions within states have floated the idea of secession or splitting off to form new states, such as the State of Jefferson movement in Northern California or efforts in parts of Oregon to join Idaho. These movements are driven more by cultural and political dissatisfaction than by economic logic. While constitutionally possible, the hurdles for secession are extremely high, requiring approval from both the state legislature and Congress. While no immediate changes to the 50-state configuration seem likely, the future remains open. Political shifts, demographic changes, and economic pressures could one day tip the balance. The conversations around statehood are no longer just symbolic. They carry real implications for representation, taxation, and the economic future of millions of American citizens living in U.S. territories. From 13 colonies to 50 states, the U.S. grew through wars, purchases, and political battles, each shaped by geography, culture, and economic ambition. The Louisiana Purchase alone doubled the nation's size for just $15 million. Today, with DC's $140 billion GDP and Puerto Rico's 3.2 million residents still lacking full representation, the conversation around future statehood is far from over. If you found this video informative, hit the like button, subscribe for more content from USA Revealed, and leave a comment below. What do you think? Could the United States ever gain a 51st state in your lifetime? Let us know your thoughts.